Hello, this is Dr. Kimani, licensed clinical psychologist. Thank you for joining us for Manifesting Healing Monday, where we talk about different issues to support the healing of us individually and collectively. I see people are joining in for our conversation today. And we are continuing our conversation talking about supporting Black women in terms of healing from toxic work environments. We have had ongoing conversations. We know that Black women, unfortunately, we have disproportionate rates in terms of experiencing negative or hostile work environments. So our guest is here right now. Hello, Tanya. How are you?
Hi, Dr. Kimani. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for joining today. So I was just
Sure.
sharing with the audience in terms of what this series is all about. And the reason that we're having these conversations is that it's important that we as Black women know that we are not alone when we experience these toxic work environments, and that we know that even though we get hurt from these situations, we will rise up. We will continue to rise up. But it's important for us to have a place for us to be able to talk about these issues, because a lot of times we're told to just deal with it. It's not a big deal. Just suck it up. But we need to be able to have a place to talk about it, because we also know that silencing is a form of oppression. So I want to welcome our guest for today, Ms. Tonya, and I will turn it over for you to briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay. Well, thanks, Dr. Kimani. It's my pleasure to be here with you today and, to share my experiences with having worked in multiple toxic environments and also my journey to manifesting healing from that. And I would just like to say that I am from the nursing community. I've been a registered nurse for over 30 years. I started as a teenager,
Wow.
practically, just out of college as a nurse, and I've worked in that profession since 1990 when I initially became licensed. And
Wow.
so, multiple environments that I've worked in, and I just wanted to share my some of my experiences and my journey throughout that process, up until
Yeah.
now.
Yes. Well, first, I want to appreciate that you are here today sharing your journey. And just the fact that you're here today representing like physical health, I'm here talking about mental health. It's just a representation that wellness is all together, right? So mental health and physical health. And we know that our mental health impacts our physical health and vice versa.
Yeah.
So if you could share with the listeners about, one or more toxic work experiences that you've had.
Oh, well, the thing about nursing that a lot of people may not be aware of is that the toxicity is oftentimes very insidious. It's not, often a out like what people would say, um, uh, something that you can see on the surface. A
Hmm.
lot of the toxicity is, let's say, cultivated even from nursing school. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. So even in that environment, because there's a lot of pressure for perfection. There's a
Ah.
lot of pressure to get things right, to do things
Mm-hmm.
right, get it done the first time. And so sometimes if a person is struggling, even in
Mm-hmm.
nursing school, there
Mm-hmm.
can be a lot of pressure from your, instructors, professors, even from your peers,
Mm-hmm.
where a person can begin to feel like, hey, maybe this is not for me. Maybe I chose the wrong path. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
this is above and beyond what I can handle. And so the
Mm-hmm.
pressure starts there, where
Wow.
people begin to
So that's
question,
self-doubt.
yeah, they begin to
Uh-huh.
question the decision that they made, to
Mm-hmm.
pursue the path of becoming a nurse. And,
Mm-hmm.
obviously with certain classes, if you're not getting certain grades or
Mm-hmm.
completing certain clinical practices competently, you can be dismissed from the program. So
Mm-hmm.
for somebody who's coming in thinking this is what they might have wanted to do all their life, or this is what
Mhm.
they've felt called to do. Other family members may also be nurses. It can be very
Mhm.
devastating to be
Yes.
under that pressure, even in school. So,
Mhm.
coming out of school now, you may be walking into an environment where you're dealing with pressure from administration, pressure
Mhm.
from more experienced colleagues,
Mhm.
um, because there isn't always the support there to
Mhm.
help you navigate how to put everything you've learned into practice
Mhm.
in, in your efforts to serve the public, right?
Right.
So again, there's that feeling of inadequacy or
Mhm.
incompetence due to the lack
Mhm.
of experience,
Mhm.
which creates another avenue for mental stress.
Yeah.
Right. And so those toxic things tend to kind of build one upon the other.
Mhm.
You may be encountering a dissatisfied patient or family. You
Mhm.
know, um, there's a lot of sometimes experiences of verbal abuse as well.
Wow. Verbal
Oh,
abuse
oh, absolutely.
by whom?
Patients, families,
Mhm.
and again, and then uh, we are also taught that these people are sick. So you're dealing with
Mhm.
sick people.
Mhm.
And so there's typically been an excusing of certain types of behavior. So you build up a level of tolerance for a
Mhm.
certain degree of animosity or even disrespect, blatant disrespect,
Mhm.
that's directed at the individual. The
Mhm.
nurse who
And you
is
still have to do your
also
job, right?
also as the caregiver, right? As
Yes.
also as in the role of the provider, you're
Mhm.
faced with that abject um, rudeness. It could be
Mhm.
take the place of discrimination. It can manifest as sexual aggression as
Mhm.
well, with those, comments or
Mhm.
possibly attempts to touch your person, touch your body
Wow.
in inappropriate ways.
Mhm.
And so all of those things, add to the toxic mix of what
Mm.
you might be dealing with as a nurse. I've experienced many moments like that in various
Wow.
jobs that I've had. And
Right.
it's particularly difficult in the hospital because you're dealing with direct care,
Mhm.
and it's face to face, right?
Mhm.
So not in a remote setting like what a lot of us are working in now,
Mhm.
but when you're there in person with the patient and with your leadership, and you're also dealing with doctors as well, and that's
Mhm.
another aspect of how things can become a little more complicated, right?
Mhm.
um, I just know that for me, being in those environments, I oftentimes felt very challenged to do
Mhm.
my job to the best of my
Right.
ability because there were so many external circumstances that would impact, the things that I would have to do, in
Mhm.
addition to the environment possibly and oftentimes sometimes being unsafe as
Ooh,
well.
wow. That's
Yeah,
awful. Antonia, can you
it
speak a
is.
little bit in terms of the experience as, being a Black nurse, right? Because you
Mhm.
mentioned issues of discrimination. Can you share a little bit in terms of what has that looked like for you in terms of your work experiences?
Well, that's a great question because the discrimination can take um, form in multiple ways.
Hmm.
And I'll give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
I mentioned that, I became a nurse back in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I was originally licensed in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still
Mm-hmm.
working in New York, but I also work in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And so back then, there was a nursing crisis almost similar to what we're dealing with today from the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, but there was a
Mm-hmm.
shortage of nurses. So in that time, there was a lot of foreign nurses coming into the United States,
Mm-hmm.
particularly from Europe and the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, in nursing at that time, much of the administration were white
Mm-hmm.
women
Mm-hmm.
that we would be working with. And so for myself and other Black nurses working in those environments, we'd be given almost like the most difficult assignments, the most challenging cases, not really
Mm-hmm.
having the assistance that other nurses were given.
Mm-hmm.
Our shift, just the way that our shifts were scheduled, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like you had breaks in between. You kind of were, put on these back-to-back schedules,
Mm-hmm.
12-hour shifts, our and you weren't given your choice of holidays. If you wanted to transfer or apply for a promotion,
Mm-hmm.
just being overlooked, not
Mm-hmm.
taking into consideration your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working in certain areas, there's typically an attempt to keep you there, to kind of box you in,
Mm-hmm.
because they are I should say, high acuity areas, but at the same time, they're not necessarily the type of roles where you would want to stay in them very long if you're looking to advance,
Yes.
in your
Yes.
career.
Uh-huh.
So then what happens is, if you're overlooked and you're not given opportunities, you're not assigned to be, in charge, you're not
Mm-hmm.
given the promotions that you're
Mm-hmm.
qualified for, you
Mm-hmm.
kind of get stuck
Right. You're
doing
blocked from
something. Yeah,
advancement.
you're blocked from
Mm-hmm.
advancement.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So with no relief, no support, just working, not knowing if you're ever going to get an opportunity to get out of a particular situation and still stay with the organization,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it can become very frustrating. It can become
Yeah.
depleting and depressing,
Yeah.
and I've
Yeah.
seen that. I have seen, white nurses come in and advance much more quickly, not having been educated in the United States, not having worked at all in the United States, just coming
Mm-hmm.
over, on being sponsored and given work visas and quickly
Mm-hmm.
advancing, quickly getting
Mm.
the positions that they would want, very easily, in fact. And
Wow.
so that, can also take a toll as well, because,
Yes. Yes. So in
where do you
terms
go
of
from
taking,
there, right?
yeah. So in terms of taking a toll, can you speak a little bit more in terms of what toll it takes, right? And the other question I wanted to ask you that you mentioned is the dynamic with the doctors. So I'm curious about the dynamic with the other nurses and with the doctors as well.
Okay, sure. Well, when I say it's detrimental in a sense that for me,
Mm-hmm.
I like growth. I like
Mm-hmm.
challenge. I like to do different things. I like
Mm-hmm.
to make progress. And,
Yes.
so for a person who's very comfortable doing what they're doing and has determined that they're going to do it for a certain length of time, it may be
Mm-hmm.
fine. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, I found it very uncomfortable. I found it stifling,
Mm.
you know. In
Uh-huh.
fact, to be stagnated in a particular role that I would rather not be,
Mm.
was suffocating to me. And to
Yes.
see that, other opportunities were given to other people with less qualifications, oftentimes less experience, it
Mm.
bothered me a lot. And
Yeah.
so I quickly learned that I had to carve a path for myself to remove myself from those type of conditions. And
Mm.
in terms of working with the doctors, well, again, I can't say collectively that there was a
Mm-hmm.
significant amount of abuse or
Mm-hmm.
discrimination from them. But what
Mm-hmm.
I would say I have seen quite often is that there's a condescending way in which they would speak to many of the
Mm.
nurses, as
Okay.
if they weren't knowledgeable enough to carry out their orders or
Yes.
care for the patients. And oftentimes it would be yelling, you know um, in an insulting way,
Hmm.
talking abruptly,
Hmm.
maybe just not giving the nurse their full attention, not being
Right.
responsive when
Mm-hmm.
they're called to address patient issues.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the things that really, add pressures to the job, because the
Absolutely.
nurse is responsible for caring for the patient based
Yes.
on what the doctors are prescribing or what they're ordering, and they're responsible to give them feedback. It
Right.
was particularly disturbing, and having worked night shifts,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes, calling a doctor, trying to get them to wake up, respond, because, they may work overnight, they're allowed to rest. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, if a patient is in distress, or you
Right.
need some orders for medication, or you need to alert them of a change in a patient's condition, they need to
Mm-hmm.
be responsive.
Right.
They would
Absolutely.
sometimes
Absolutely.
they would sometimes get angry that they were
So
being
that puts you in
called.
a really bad position.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I quickly learned to realize that not only was I charged professionally with advocating for my patients, I had to advocate for myself. I
Mm.
pretty much had to, become much more assertive in my
Mm.
role in order to be successful in doing what needed to get done.
Right.
And again, now be compounding the levels of stress and
Right.
toxicity and
And
things
how
that you
was
have to
that
deal with.
received when you asserted yourself, when you advocated for yourself? How was that received?
Not always well, believe it or not, because there's an expectation for nurses to be somewhat more passive,
Mm.
just kind of like suck it up and
Mm.
be quiet and
Mm.
do your job, keep
Mm-hmm.
it moving. It's
Mm-hmm.
not always taken kindly that you speak up about something,
Mm.
particularly something that's creates a safety issue, you know,
Right.
that impacts the morale in the workplace.
Yes.
There wasn't
Yes.
really too much concern for that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult because sometimes you don't even have the support of your colleagues around when you're
Mm.
dealing with situations like that. Sometimes you're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the one person dealing with a lot of issues by yourself. And
And
that is
nobody's
what
backing you up. Like
exactly
when you speak
nobody's
up, nobody
backing you
backs you
up.
up.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
you might be trying to get, the attention of other higher ups to
Mm-hmm.
support you, but they're not, their voices can't be heard and they can't be seen. So
Wow.
I quickly realized that, again, when the environment began to feel unsafe for me to
Mm-hmm.
practice,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like being in this capacity would put someone in jeopardy, put my license that I work very hard for in jeopardy, I realized that it's time to move on.
Right. Because when we talked earlier, you said that, because I said, well, how have you stayed in this field for so long, right? Because you talked
Right.
about so many layers of toxicity and you talked about knowing when to go, right? So
Yes.
can you share with the audience, how do you know when to go? So you talked about safety. When your safety is jeopardized or your patients, are there other issues that kind of factor into when you kind of know it's time to go?
Yes. Well, just to put it in perspective, when I'm speaking about my safety, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
only referring to my physical safety, I'm referring to
Mm-hmm.
my mental safety, my
Mm-hmm.
psychological safety,
Hmm.
um, my the safety of my being as a whole.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and then that impacts me being present and able to serve and care for others, you see.
Yes.
So
Yes.
on that level, when I take those things into consideration,
Mm-hmm.
um, I do pray, I do meditate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough is to have mentors.
Mm.
Um, and not necessarily, I would call them official mentors, but
Mm-hmm.
people who have just given me guidance that have
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to move forward and take chances and
Mm-hmm.
embrace change in a healthy
Mm.
way.
Right.
I once worked in a skilled nursing facility,
Mm-hmm.
but my very first time going to work there, I took on a management position. And when I interviewed with the director, she said, and she was a Black woman, which was surprising to me when I went there. And whether I get the job or not, believe it or not, when I
Hmm.
see a Black woman in a leadership position, it just fills me with joy because I know that that
Yes.
was not an easy road.
Yeah.
So I'm happy regardless, right? But
Yes.
anyway, so I did get that position working with her. But one of the things, and I told her I was a little ambivalent about taking on the job because it was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of responsibility, much more than I had been accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, well, she said, you wouldn't be able to reach the fruit. Sometimes you wouldn't be able to reach the fruit unless you're willing to go out on a limb.
Hmm.
And, I left with that feeling like she was giving me some direct encouragement just
Yeah.
to go for it.
She was
You
helping you
know,
grow, right?
she was
So
helping me to
knowing that in
grow.
that growth process, it might be uncomfortable, but she's giving you opportunities to grow because she believes in you.
Yes, yes, she really
Yeah.
did. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes it helps
Mm-hmm.
us to grow when
Yeah.
others can see within us the
Mm-hmm.
potential that we don't yet see within
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I think to
especially
say
when it
how
arounds
powerful that
change.
is coming from another Black woman, right?
Oh,
So you're already
absolutely.
happy to see her in a position of authority, right? But also
Right.
that she's supporting your growth, which is very powerful too. So you talked about that's more of a positive experience in terms of having a supervisor who's supporting you. But you also
Exactly.
talked about situations in which your psychological well-being is not protected, right? So I think it will be helpful for the women listening to know, like, what are some signs psychologically, like, this is taking a toll on me? Like, what are some signs that they can look out for too, that maybe
Well,
that you've experienced?
yeah, I mean, well, look out for things wherein, let's say there's something you want to do, a particular
Mm-hmm.
goal you want to achieve, or a path you want to
Mm-hmm.
take,
Mm-hmm.
and you move in that direction, but you're not getting the support you need, or you're
Mm-hmm.
not getting taken seriously, and
Mm-hmm.
being considered for the
Mm.
positions that you want, or for the
Right.
programs that you want to participate in.
Right.
Oftentimes, you might bring up an issue, let's say in a meeting or maybe on a
Mm-hmm.
one-to-one conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing is really addressed, nothing's done
Mm.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
Circumstances don't change,
Mm-hmm.
right? You might be I find like if I'll give you a prime example. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go back to school for another degree,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have required for me to change, my schedule somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a conversation that I had with the person who was supervising me. And she wanted to get permission for that to be done, but it
Mm-hmm.
came down from a higher authority in the organization that they weren't going to change my schedule in order to
Wow.
facilitate me going back to school. It was just going to
Mm.
be either, and the specific message that I got verbatim was like, job is priority. She can either do the job or leave.
Wow. Like you're
And,
just expendable like that.
I mean, like, I'm the type of person, look, I'm from New York City. I'm going to do what I want to do. And,
Right.
I'm not going to let a job stop me from advancing on my education. I just wasn't
Yeah.
going to allow that.
Yes.
So some of the strength I had already within myself, and I
Mm-hmm.
just felt like some of those environments was just challenging me to be me.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
challenging me to go within myself and find what was it within myself and bring
Mm-hmm.
it out so that I could express myself,
Right. It's
fully.
yeah. Yes, it's kind of like you were your own Harriet Tubman, right? So sometimes we look
Yeah.
outside of us to see like who's going to lead the way for me, right? But you were like, no, what you're saying does not make sense to me. This is not my reality. This is not what I want. So you had to lead the way for yourself because you knew that there's something bigger or greater for you, right? So you
Oh,
had that
yes.
within you. Yes. So
Yes.
I'm wondering because
And
you
I think
mentioned
though,
also,
Dr. Kamani, sometimes you
uh-huh.
need a challenge. Sometimes you need a challenge to even find out what that is.
Yes.
I think what happens is a lot of times with nurses, they succumb to the external pressure and
Hmm.
become deflated and give up.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
I would challenge you, when the pressures are coming from the outside, that's not the time to quit. And when I
Yes.
say not to quit, I don't mean leave a toxic environment. I mean, don't quit on yourself.
Mm. That's
And
a
there's
good
a
point.
difference. There's a
That's
difference.
absolutely a difference, right? Because we many times as Black women get that mixed up. So we think that if we leave, then we're letting other people win, right?
Right.
Or they got something over on us. But we have to recognize our health takes priority. So if we're in a situation that's toxic and it's taking a toll on us physically, psychologically, spiritually, it's time to go. But that doesn't mean that you are giving up on yourself. That means that you love yourself enough to say, I'm better than this and not allow yourself to continue to be harmed. So I love the way you said that. It's like, no, it's not you. Do not give up on yourself. So I'm wondering, because you said also that there are nurses leaving the field, even like new nurses. So
Right.
I was like, oh my God, that's terrible that you go through all that training and then you end up leaving the field. So what words of wisdom would you give to nurses who are either considering leaving the field or nurses who are considering the field and they just got in?
Wow. I wish I could spend a lot of time talking to them, believe me, because I see some beautiful young women, even men
Mm-hmm.
coming into nursing and being so overwhelmed, just
Mm,
overwhelmed with the responsibility, but also overwhelmed with what they're having to face.
mm,
And what I would say to them is think, spend some time contemplating and in self reflection about what it is you want to do and why you chose to become a nurse. Because I think
mm,
that's one of the things that sometimes you can forget. And develop a mission statement for yourself, a
mm,
personal mission statement. Because
mm-hmm.
sometimes when we don't have a personal mission statement, we miss our mark somewhere
Yes,
along the line. And and
yes.
and and it's easy to get sidetracked when other people are attempting to manipulate you,
Or
right?
harm you.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
or harm you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for example, I know one of my mission, a core aspect of my mission is to advocate for my patients
Mm-hmm.
and to be my best self in the
Mm-hmm.
service of
Yeah.
those that I am given to care for.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a commitment that when that becomes detrimental, I automatically know it's not going to work out. I don't
Yes.
I don't try to force through that in a
Mm-hmm.
sense of, for example, working in an environment where you're given more than you can handle.
Mm.
It's not possible. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Either I'm not going to be able to give my best, or I'm not going to be able to perform at my best.
Or
And
you're
when
gonna burn
those two,
out.
I'm going to burn out. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
time. It really, as an individual, when you look at what is important to you and
Mm-hmm.
how you serve and how you show up,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easier to navigate those waters when they get rough, and
Yes.
to weather those storms. Because
Yes.
without a compass within
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you know, it's very easy to get sidetracked and thrown and tossed because
Yeah.
it's rough out there. I would be the first to
Absolutely.
say it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy line of work to be in.
Yes, yes. And so you're saying in terms of really connecting to what brought you to the field in the first place? What was your love for the profession that brought you here, because it's so important to reconnect to that when you go through adversity. Because I know even for myself, I was thinking when I was in a very toxic work environment recently, I was like, do I want to be a psychologist? Like, is this a sign or something? But I had to take a step back and be away from that environment to recognize I love psychology, right? I love being a psychologist. I did not love being in a toxic environment that did not sustain or support my growth. So being very clear about
Yes.
that. So I'm wondering also if you can, because you talked about different ways that you have healed, right? You talked about prayer, you talked about meditation. What are some other ways that you have healed from these toxic work environments?
Well, getting out of them. That's the most, that's the definitely one of the most effective ways to heal is to get out of them. I
Absolutely.
mean, you can't find you.
Absolutely.
I mean, think of it. I mean, your skin would never heal if you don't, if you stay in an acid bath, right?
Ooh, I
You
love
have to
it.
get out of
Yes.
it. You
Yes.
have
Say that again to people in the back. Say that again. I love that quote. Say it again.
I said your skin would never heal if you don't get out of the acid bath.
Yes, yes, yes. And I read a quote too similar to that. They said, you can't heal in the same place that harmed you. So you have to get
Exactly.
out of that toxic environment. Yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I
And I
agree.
know you talked also about like mentorship. Is that something that you would suggest for maybe veteran nurses and, newer nurses as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you see, a mentoring relationship sometimes develops very organically because,
Hmm,
yeah, and you don't know when it's going to happen. Would it be
right.
great? Would it be great for nursing as a whole if there was an official mentoring program, if every organization had one and people
Hmm,
could volunteer to be mentors for
hmm,
newer clinicians? That would be great.
hmm,
But unfortunately, in many places that doesn't exist. So I think
hmm.
what happens is that these relationships are sometimes unexpected and then
Yes.
they get cultivated when there's some sort of an affinity between two people, let's say an
Hmm,
experienced nurse and a novice, and the
hmm,
relationship grows from there where
hmm,
there may be conversations, little tips, some supportive communication, giving
hmm.
direction, being able to ask opinions and get feedback, and just generally supportive
Yes.
and not feeling threatened, because in order to
Right.
be a good mentor you cannot feel threatened by the newcomers, right?
Exactly.
And what
Exactly. And
happens
how
is
will the field continue if we don't bring in new people, right?
exactly,
So it just
exactly.
makes sense. So I'm wondering as we're winding down, Tonya, this has been so enlightening because you have told so many things about, how to recognize when something's toxic and that you have the option to leave, right? That you
Absolutely.
have such training and experience that I think sometimes we get locked into when these bad things happen to us, we think we're stuck. And we're not stuck, right? So you are a
Right,
classic example of that. You are not stuck. You
right.
can move on. And that is so important to remind us of that and to remind us of why we came into the field, right?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Yes,
So
yes.
are there
You're not
any,
stuck. I would tell to Ellen, you're never stuck. You can
yes,
always move when you know that you're not in a safe space.
yes, yes. And you indicated that there's a shortage of nurses. So it seems like you should be able to go, you should have a lot of flexibility and options, right?
Right. Yes,
Yes.
there is a lot of flexibility and there are many options,
Mm-hmm.
but again, one of the things that's really key is looking at the type of role you're interested in and what
Mm,
the responsibilities of that role is.
yes.
So you don't want to go into something and then you find out, oh, I didn't really understand what the role was. That's why it's
Mm,
very important when you're having interviews. Don't Before you even look at salary and benefits, find out what it is expected of you to do.
mm. That's
Find out
important.
what your patient load or your caseload is going to be, because those are
Mm-hmm.
important factors that's going to impact your ability to carry out your duties every day.
Right.
And if the organization is asking inhumane, work from you,
Yeah.
then you have to reconsider whether or not that's going to be a good move. Also
Right.
looking in, is it going to impact your personal life? You know, do you have a
Yes.
family? Do you have other responsibilities that are equally
Mm-hmm.
important as the job? If the
Because it
job
bleeds
is
over to that.
right, exactly. I mean, if you know your role, you may want to advance and be in
Mm-hmm.
management or be in
Mm-hmm.
administration, but can you do a 10 or 12
Mm-hmm.
hour day? Does that work for
Mm-hmm.
you? Do you have
Right.
backup for your child care? You know, do you
Right.
have a supportive network that can assist you when you have to work weekends and you have to work holidays or things like that, or if it's expected of you?
Yeah.
So these are all the types of things to consider. And
Yeah.
again, I said for myself, you know, I take the responsibilities of my family also equally important to my job, if not more so.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
always questioning things like that, you know.
Yes. So
And
important in terms of our priorities.
yeah, you have to prioritize, and most
Mm-hmm.
importantly, you have to prioritize yourself and your own well-being.
Yes.
And if you're at a place in a stage where a particular role isn't going to fit for you, don't waste your time. You know,
Yeah.
like don't put yourself through the pressures and the drama of trying to do something if you know it doesn't fit into your life,
Right. Right.
you know.
And like you said, the importance of speaking up and advocating not only for your patients,
Right.
but for yourself, even if
Exactly.
there's pushback, right? And
Exactly.
you
Yes.
also mentioned that if there is pushback, that's a sign that that's not a healthy work environment for you.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because I think now that with the pandemic, with so many nurses being so much more vocal than they had been
Mm.
in the past, because everything is now out in the public, you know, lack
Yes.
of protective equipment,
Mm.
staffing, if you see overcrowding, rationing of equipment and
Mm.
supplies, these are things that are all throughout the media. You know, but if
Mm.
you've ever worked in a facility before where you've had issues like this that are staffing issues and supply and equipment issues and
Mm.
toxic environments and hostile, violent
Mm.
patients. You know, this is something that you've been dealing with that's culminated and
Yes.
exploded as a result of the pandemic. So now we're seeing a darker side of what's been going on all along to a lesser
Yes.
degree. And this is
Yes.
what I think is vital for the public to understand that, you
Yes.
know, if 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 nurses walked out across this country,
Hmm.
I honestly believe the healthcare system would collapse.
I'm sure
Like
it would. I'm sure it would.
within
Yeah. And-
hours, it would be a
Yes.
total
Yes.
collapse. You know,
Yes.
and
And
right now we're on the brink. We are really
ooh,
on the brink. And even, you know, what's going on, we don't know how long it's going to last. If there's a
right.
ripple effect, there's a ripple effect through the system. And, you know, we might have come through the acute phase of a crisis, but you
Hmm.
know, there's fallout after that, right?
Absolutely.
Where do we go from here?
Yes, yes.
You
And
know?
especially once the cracks of the system have been revealed, what are we going to do to address the cracks, right? Because there's a lot of repair that needs to happen. And, you know, one of the things that has happened with COVID is that, yes, we recognize in terms of collective trauma, we understand the need for mental health. We, you know, understand the value of so many of our essential workers, right? But it has also revealed a lot of things that are not okay. So, right. So things, the truth is coming to light. So now it's okay. So what's going to happen at this point? And, you know, I think I told you that I just came from the National, yeah, I did. I told you, I just came from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And this conversation just reminds me so much in terms of, as Black people, what we have gone through to do the jobs that we do, and that we're standing on the shoulders of greatness. And we were medical doctors, nurses, psychologists in our own different forms, even when we weren't allowed to be. Okay. And we have been able to persevere and do these things. And we have to remember that we stand on the shoulders of greatness. We have to remember that when we're treated in disrespectful ways, particularly in the workplace, that we will not be silenced because our ancestors, they attempted to silence them, but they weren't silenced and they kept fighting. And so in honor of them, that we must continue to speak out against injustice, no matter where it is, particularly in the workplace. Okay. So, Tonya, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me in this conversation. It has been very rich in terms of understanding the experiences of nurses which I don't think I've had a nurse on yet. So that was very enlightening for me. And I just want to share with the audience, thank you for tuning in as well. We will continue these conversations talking about Black women healing from toxic work environments. If you would like to see more of the videos that I've already done, please check out my YouTube channel, Lifting As We Climb Consulting Wellness Services. This video is going to be uploaded to YouTube as well. And I also want to let you know, just as a psychologist who has been in a toxic work environment, that has really informed my work in many ways in terms of my own healing personally and professionally. And it's really helped me in terms of really connecting to the pain that many Black women have experienced, because we can't heal if we don't reveal what we're hurting from, okay? And so part of what I'm doing now is offering a job coaching program for Black women, because we need to be able to process the pain that we've gone through in these toxic work environments so that we're in a better position as we're going to other environments, that we're open to receive it and that we are open to really letting our light shine, because these toxic work environments can kind of make us dim our light and all these different things. So how do we deal with that garbage so we don't take it to the next environment? So if you want more information about the job coaching program, you can go to my Instagram or to my website, liftingasweclimbconsulting.com. And again, I want to say, Tonya, I so appreciate you. And I say to the audience, thank you again for joining, and please tune in next week. Take
Thank
care.
you, Dr. Kamani.
Yes.
And if you want to have more conversations with a nurse about nursing, check out my channel on YouTube, Nurses Speak.
Nurses
I'll
Speak.
see you there.
That's right. That's
Thank
right.
you.
That's right. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.